Close your eyes. Imagine waking up in total darkness. The air is thick, stale. Your chest tightens, each breath shallower than the last. You reach out, and your fingers press against wood. Solid, unyielding. Then the horror sinks in. You've been buried alive. But this isn't a nightmare. This is Angela Monroe's reality. Her heart slams against her ribs. The space is suffocating. Dirt trickles through the cracks of the wooden box, gritty and cold. She forces herself to stay still. Panic wastes oxygen. Her wrists throb, bound by tape. Her mind races, searching for answers. The last thing she remembers? James. A rare moment of kindness. A chance to make things right. Then pain. A sharp sting at her neck. The world tilting. Darkness swallowing her whole. And now, this. A coffin beneath the earth. A ticking clock. But Angela Monroe isn't ready to die. Not today. Not like this. Tonight, we uncover the chilling true story of love turned lethal, a desperate fight for survival, and the justice that came after. Because what her attacker never expected was that Angela Monroe wasn't going down without a fight. Welcome to True Crime Intel, where we bring you the most chilling, real-life crime stories. I'm Williams, and today we're diving into the harrowing survival story of Angela Monroe, how she was buried alive, fought against the impossible, and lived to tell the tale. Stay with me, because this one is unbelievable. Angela Monroe was the kind of woman who didn't break easily. She had learned how to be strong from a young age. Growing up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, life was never picture perfect. Her mother, Denise, worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, leaving Angela to take care of her younger siblings. From a young age, she knew what struggle looked like, but she also knew what love and resilience felt like. She dreamed of becoming a nurse, helping people, making a difference. That was always the goal. Then she met James Carter. It was a summer afternoon in Youngstown, Ohio. Angela had taken a weekend trip with her best friend, just for fun. They stopped at a small diner off Market Street. And that's where she saw him, tall, athletic, with a smooth, confident smile. James worked at a nearby auto shop. He was charming, funny, and had this way of making her feel like she was the only person in the room. They exchanged numbers that day. By the end of the week, he was calling her every night. Within a month, he was driving 2 hours just to take her on dates. Angela had never felt love like this before. Everything about him felt exciting. The way he held her hand, the way he talked about their future, the way he made her laugh when she was having a bad day. It wasn't long before she packed her bags and moved to Youngstown to be with him. A year later, he proposed. She still remembered the way her heart fluttered when he pulled out that ring. It wasn't the biggest diamond, but it was beautiful. He promised her forever that night, promised that he would always take care of her, love her, protect her. But promises are easy to break. James started changing. It wasn't overnight. At first it was little things. He became obsessed with the gym. He spent hours lifting weights, pushing himself harder and harder. He started taking steroids, bulking up fast. Angela thought it was just a phase. Then came the mood swings. One day he'd be sweet, buying her flowers, kissing her forehead. The next, he'd be cold, distant. Then there were the outbursts, explosive moments of anger over the smallest things. At first it was just words, harsh, biting words that made her feel small. Then it became more. If she questioned him about anything, where he had been, why he was acting different, he'd snap, yelling, slamming doors, punching walls. And then one night, it wasn't the wall. Angela had just put their 3-year-old son Jaden to bed. James came home late. He was angry, accusing her of things she hadn't done. His voice was low at first, but it rose with every word, sharper, more violent. And then, his fist. It happened so fast. One second she was standing, the next she was on the floor, the taste of blood in her mouth. Angela knew right then she had to leave. She wasn't going to let her son grow up in this. She wasn't going to become another statistic. The next morning, she told James she was moving back to Pittsburgh, that she was taking Jaden with her. James just stood there, silent, watching her with that same unreadable expression. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. He pulled her in, kissed her forehead, and told her he understood. That if she really wanted to leave, he wouldn't stop her. Angela almost believed him. But she didn't know that James had already made up his mind. She wasn't leaving. Not alive. James Carter knew he had gone too far. For days after he hit Angela, he was quiet, almost remorseful. He didn't yell. He didn't slam doors. He didn't even argue when she ignored him. Then one night, he did something she never expected. He apologized. Angela had just finished putting Jaden to sleep when James walked into the bedroom, his head low, his voice soft. "I messed up," he said. "I never should have hurt you." Angela didn't speak. She had heard apologies before, empty words that never lasted. But James kept going. "I love you, Angie," he whispered, stepping closer. "You and Jaden are everything to me. I don't want to lose you." Tears welled in his eyes. Real or fake, Angela couldn't tell. "I know I've been out of control," he continued. I need help. I want to fix this. Please, just give me one more chance." Angela stared at him. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that the man she fell in love with was still in there, buried beneath the rage, the steroids, the violence. So she stayed. And for the first time in months, things got better. James stopped snapping at her. He made an effort, cooking dinner, helping with Jaden, even surprising her with flowers one afternoon. Angela felt something she hadn't in a long time: hope. But what she didn't know was that James's kindness wasn't real. It was a setup, a game he was playing. Because in his mind, Angela had already made her choice. And if he couldn't have her, no one could. One evening, after weeks of playing the perfect boyfriend, James made his move. "Let's go shopping," he said. Angela hesitated. They hadn't gone out together in months. But James smiled, reaching for her hand. "I just want to spend time with you," he said. "No fights, no drama, just us." Angela felt that hope again. Maybe he really was trying. She got dressed, put on a little makeup. She even slipped her engagement ring back on, just like old times. But when she stepped out of the bathroom, she knew immediately something was wrong. James wasn't alone. Devontae Robinson stood beside him, leaning against the kitchen counter. Angela's stomach tightened. She never liked Devontae. There was something off about him, something cold, something dangerous. Before she could react, James took a step forward. Bzzz! Pain exploded through her neck. White-hot, searing pain. Her body seized, her vision blurred. Then, darkness. When Angela opened her eyes, she couldn't move. Her wrists tied, her ankles bound, duct tape sealed over her mouth. She was in the trunk of a car. Panic surged through her veins. She tried to scream, but the tape muffled her cries. She thrashed, but the ropes held firm. The car bumped along the road, jostling her against the hard surface. Angela forced herself to breathe, to think. Where are they taking me? She didn't have an answer. But deep down, she already knew. She wasn't going home. The car drove for over an hour, maybe more. Then finally it slowed. Gravel crunched beneath the tires. The engine cut off. Footsteps. The trunk popped open. Angela barely had a second to react before rough hands grabbed her, dragging her out. The air was cold. The scent of pine trees filled her nostrils. They were in the woods, far, isolated. No one would hear her scream. James and Devontae carried her deeper into the forest. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Then she saw it, a hole, shallow, freshly dug. Angela thrashed harder, screaming against the tape. James ignored her. This didn't have to happen. he muttered, almost disappointed. But you wanted to leave me. Devante just chuckled. Ain't no leaving now. They lowered her into the hole. Angela sobbed against the tape, her body convulsing with fear. Then came the crate, a wooden box. They placed her inside, slamming the lid shut. Darkness swallowed her. She felt the weight of dirt hitting the top. One scoop, then another, until the sound faded. Until she was alone. Buried alive. Silence. Angela could hear her own heartbeat, wild, erratic, slamming against her ribs. She was trapped. The wooden crate was tight, barely enough space to move. The air inside was thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth and fresh-cut wood. She tried to scream, but the duct tape over her mouth muffled every sound. Above her, she could still hear them, James and Devante. Their voices were distant now, fading. Then came the final sound that made her blood turn to ice. The sound of a fallen tree being dragged over her grave. Angela's stomach twisted. They weren't just burying her. They were making sure she never got out. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Angela's breathing grew faster, shallower. Panic clawed at her throat. No, stay calm, think. She shifted her hands, wincing as the rope dug into her wrists. The more she struggled, the tighter it seemed to get. She had to think, had to fight. Her mind raced back to every true crime story she had ever read, every survival show she had ever watched. People had survived worse. She just had to find a way. Her fingers brushed against something cold, hard, a ring. Her engagement ring. Hope sparked in her chest. Diamonds were one of the hardest substances in the world. Maybe, just maybe, Angela twisted the ring, angling the diamond against the duct tape around her wrists. She started sawing, slowly, carefully. Her arms ached. Sweat dripped down her forehead, mixing with dirt. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Because if she did, she was dead. Minutes dragged into eternity. Then finally, the rope snapped. Angela's breath hitched. She wasted no time, yanking the tape off her mouth, ignoring the sting as it ripped from her skin. She pressed her palms against the wooden crate. It was solid, heavy, but it wasn't impossible. Angela balled her fists and punched. The crate barely moved. She tried again, and again. The wood groaned, but it didn't break. Dirt trickled in from the cracks. Angela's pulse skyrocketed. She had to move faster. Using her freed hands, she clawed at the wood, scraping, pushing, punching. Her knuckles burned. Splinters sliced her skin. But she kept going. And then a crack. A small one, but enough. She punched again, harder. The wood splintered beneath her fists. More dirt poured in. Angela gasped, choking on dust, but she didn't stop. She dug her fingers into the loose soil, clawing her way up, inch by inch, breath by breath. Her arms screamed in pain, her lungs burned. But she kept going, because she refused to die in this grave. Not like this. Then, air. Cold, fresh air. Angela's hand broke through the surface. She gasped, sucking in oxygen like it was the most precious thing in the world. She forced her body forward, pushing, clawing, dragging herself out. And then suddenly she was free. Angela collapsed onto the forest floor, her body shaking, covered in dirt and sweat. She had been buried alive for over an hour, and she was still alive. But now, she had another problem. It was pitch black. She had no idea where she was, and James and Devante could still be nearby. She had to keep moving. Angela Monroe didn't stop to think. She didn't stop to cry. She didn't even stop to catch her breath. Because she knew, if James and Devante were still nearby, they would finish what they started. So she ran. Barefoot, covered in dirt, her body aching, she forced herself forward. Every step was agony. Her muscles screamed. Her lungs burned. But she didn't stop. The forest was endless, pitch black. Every tree looked the same. Every shadow felt like a threat. But then music. Faint, distant, but there. She wasn't alone out here. Angela pushed toward the sound, stumbling through the undergrowth. She had no idea how long she ran. Time had lost all meaning. Then, finally, a road. Gravel, asphalt, civilization. Angela staggered forward, waving her arms, screaming for help. Headlights appeared in the distance. A car! It slowed, then stopped. A man got out, his eyes wide in shock. "Oh my God! Are you okay?" Angela collapsed to her knees. She didn't have the strength to explain. All she could say was, "Help me." The police arrived within minutes. Angela was rushed to the hospital, dehydrated, covered in bruises, her hands raw from clawing her way out of the grave. But she was alive, and she was ready to talk. She told them everything: James, Devante, the stun gun, the crate, the burial. At first, the officers looked at her in disbelief. Because who survives being buried alive? Then they saw her injuries, the dirt beneath her fingernails, the ligature marks on her wrists. And they knew she wasn't lying. Angela Monroe had done the impossible. Now it was time to bring James and Devante to justice soon. It didn't take long to track them down. Authorities traced Devante's truck, leading them straight to his house. James and Devante were inside, laughing, drinking, acting like nothing had happened. They never expected Angela to survive. They never expected the police to come knocking. But when officers stormed in, guns drawn, James's smile vanished. "James Carter, you're under arrest for attempted murder, kidnapping, and assault." James didn't fight. He didn't argue. He just stared at the floor, silent. Devante, he ran, but he didn't get far. Police tackled him in the backyard, pinning him to the ground. He screamed, cursed, begged, but it was over. James Carter and Devante Robinson went to trial 6 months later. The evidence was overwhelming. Angela's testimony, the stun gun found in Devante's truck, the shovel with James's fingerprints, the location of the grave, exactly where Angela described. The jury didn't take long to decide. James Carter guilty. Attempted murder, kidnapping, assault. Sentenced to 25 years in prison. Devante Robinson guilty. Accomplice to attempted murder. Sentenced to 5 years. Angela Monroe walked out of that courtroom with her head held high. She took Jaden and left Ohio for good, starting fresh in Pittsburgh. She went back to school, became a nurse, rebuilt her life, and she never looked back. Because she wasn't just a survivor. She was a fighter, a woman who had been buried alive and clawed her way back. Some people say survival is luck, but Angela Monroe proved survival is willpower. Her story isn't just about escaping death. It's about escaping abuse. It's about strength. It's about knowing when to walk away and never looking back. But let me ask you, what would you do if you woke up buried alive? Could you fight your way out? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more unbelievable true crime stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to True Crime Intel. Because trust me, this is just the beginning.